Audio testing, 1, 2, 3. Lights on, camera rolling, and action.
Welcome to the Scaling Creator Podcast, the one-stop shop that explores problems, solutions, and stories for business-minded creators. I'm Soren Dickens.
And I'm Erickson Dickens.
We'll be talking about everything from self-discovery, storytelling, leadership, marketing, sales, operations, and finance.
If you like a healthy dose of education mixed with a generous dash of insightful entertainment, prepare for your ears to be pleasured. Oh yeah.
Make sure to check us out at scalingcreator.com and also join our free Discord community.
Scaling Creator launching in 3, 2, 1.
The following content is not intended for all listeners, but we strongly encourage all listeners to listen regardless. All right, welcome back to the Scaling Creator Podcast. I'm here in the production van with Erickson Dickens, and we're going to be talking a little bit about where we started our journey as creatives, where we started our journey as filmmakers, and really what inspired us as young entrepreneurial-minded creatives to be agency owners today. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, go check out our free Discord community. We're providing a lot of value to aspiring creatives through our Discord community. We have channels for self-discovery, we have channels for storytelling, sales, marketing, operations, finance, and even travel. And I don't know when you're listening to this episode right now, but in terms of travel, we're actually taking a trip out to the Philippines next week to go and visit 9 other fellow creatives. We're really looking forward to it, and we can't wait to share some of that content with you guys when we get back. So with that being said, back to the episode. Erickson, what else are we going to be covering today?
So we're going to be diving into our past in terms of how we kind of got into making movies as kids and how that passion evolved into a whole childhood of creativity. It's interesting looking back on it, how young we actually were when we got into making movies. I mean, we were like 9, 10 years old. We put a lot of time into it, and it's just crazy now that we're in our late 20s, we're still doing the same thing. You know, it's just on a different level, different purpose at this point. But looking back on it, those years making childhood movies were definitely some of the most fun, most intrinsically rewarding times of my life. Just that's when the spark really started, I don't know exactly what led us to making our first little short film, but I just remember me personally, I loved movies as a kid. I loved them. I'd spend hours watching movies. I remember there would be certain movies that we would watch. We'd go to Blockbuster as a kid. We'd get a movie with mom, a couple movies. We'd come back, we'd watch it, and then we would rewind it and then watch it again. And then sometimes the next day we'd watch it 1 or 2 more times because we were just so hooked on the movies. And for me personally, as a kid, my passion for filmmaking really started. It wasn't just the pure entertainment side of watching a movie. At a young age, I really started to dissect the movie itself. Like, what was the overall message of this movie? What were the different techniques they used to translate a certain mood? What were the different acting styles from the actors, and how did they handle a certain scene, a certain emotion? And that, I became kind of obsessed with that as a kid. Looking back on it, I think the first time I was inspired to make a movie by myself as a kid, like on our own, I was at my friend's house, my best friend at the time. His name was Nick. And Nick had a couple older brothers, and they were creative themselves. And I remember one of the brothers showed me and Nick a movie that he had made with his friends. And I remember just watching it, and I was just blown away. Like, you guys made this? It had like little special effects, from one of those old special effects softwares. Do you remember what they were called, the softwares?
I don't remember what they were called, but I remember what we started editing on.
What was that one called?
We started editing on Pinnacle Studios on
right.
an old Windows computer, and looking back on it, that thing couldn't have handled our footage today.
Probably couldn't handle like one file.
No, there's no way. So it is wild to think about.
Yeah. But I remember that, just watching the movie that they made, and I was just inspired. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to make a movie. I have to do something like this. This is so cool. If somebody can do it like that, then I can do it like that, but I'm going to do it better. And I think the first little movie we ever made, so I don't think you were actually in on this one, but The Monkey Man. Do you remember The Monkey Man?
I do. Yeah, I remember The Monkey Man.
Probably 9 years old, me and my best friend Nick, we made a little movie about a bounty hunter who had to go find this monkey man, Bigfoot guy, who had slaughtered a bunch of campers. And I played the hero, of course. I always wanted to be the hero. But I had to go hunt my friend Nick, who played the Monkey Man, and it ended with the most epic climatic showdown you can possibly imagine in modern day cinema. Yeah, it was something else. But yeah, and then the next one, I think, Soren, you were involved with. Was it The Man with No Fear?
I think so. I think there was a sequel to The Monkey Man. I think there was a Monkey Man 2, but I don't think that ever came out. It never made theaters. But
we tried to milk it, just like modern day filmmakers, modern day studios try to milk it for as much as they can, and we saw that at a young age. It sucked.
I think that the storyline followed the first one to a T, just a different location.
It was a replicate of it. Yeah, Tony Ott was in on that one, our friend at the time. Oh man, it was horrible.
We were pretty confident though. We had everyone roped into that one. But that's normal, especially as a creator. And even you look at your childhood and you look at projects that may never have made it to the finish line. We're still dealing with that now. There are often times where we come across project opportunities where there is a start date and there is no delivery date. And at this point, you just kind of accept it and move on and take it as a, sunk cost, great experience. But, that experience from a young age, it's really what gives you the confidence to keep moving forward, because we didn't stop there. The Monkey Man 2 wasn't the end of it. We went into Westerns, high budget, big names. I mean, we went all in.
Original soundtracks too.
Original soundtracks. I'm pretty sure that Erickson was actually singing directly into the camcorder while he was filming.
Oh, the man with no fear. Oh, the man with no. Oh yeah. It was big budget.
Pretty
stuff.
Catchy.
It was funny too, because we would come up with creative ways to do like effects and stuff, or to make certain scenes work, using our innovation back then as kids to do as much as we can. Like one example, remember we were doing that one movie at the time about a shark in a swimming pool.
Oh, yeah.
Some bad guy put a shark in a swimming pool, and we spent weeks creating the shark.
We used chicken wire and duct tape.
Exactly. And it looked cool.
It did.
Yeah.
Except it didn't handle well in the water. And we also tried to film it in the dead of winter, and the pool was probably like 45 degrees.
Needless to say, that movie did not last very long. We ended up cutting production short, and we just bailed on the movie. But leading up to it, I think, taught us a lot.
It did.
So we spent a lot of time thinking about how to create the shark in a realistic way. How can we get underwater shots? What are the best ways to kind of capture this feeling of terror? We would make like
I think it was inspired by our Shark Week binge at our grandparents' house, because we did start production at our grandparents' house in the garage. I remember that clear as day. I remember that like it was yesterday. And looking back on the innovation that we did, like the innovation that we would go through, we weren't really limited. Like, I think one thing that played to our advantage was we had a lot of like cool props. Yeah. Like, especially guns. We had no shortage of firearms, and I'm pretty sure like we were using live firearms on our sets as like 10-year-olds.
Sure.
And we never even thought twice about, this could be really dangerous, because it wasn't dangerous. We were 10 and we could handle firearms. And if you look at these Hollywood stars today, they are seasoned actors that can't even handle firearms, and they do it for a living. And we were literally 10 years old using live firearms in our sets with live blanks. Remember the revolver? That thing was legit. It was a 9mm blank revolver.
Totally. Oh yeah. And I remember you were making little pipe bombs as a kid, and we were talking
real effects.
And it worked. And
like real effects.
Like, let's make a movie somehow around a pipe bomb just so we can use the pipe bomb.
Yes.
Oh God.
And get all the friends together and figure out how we can make a...
Yeah. It was so robust. Like I remember for Christmas or for our birthdays, most kids are asking for video games or something of that caliber, and I was asking for wigs. I was asking for fake blood. I was asking for props, like
editing
software is like,
or a camcorder.
Yeah,
totally.
I was that kid who was rocking like wigs at the time because I thought it was so cool to personify different types of characters, and always looking for ways to include characters with different personalities, because that's something we would do a lot in our movies to finesse, since we didn't have a lot of actors. Obviously, it was you, me, Nick, maybe another person or two, but we would play like different characters in the movies. Like we would come up with camera tricks too to somehow be able to. I remember there was a couple of movies where we were having a conversation, like me and the other character who I was also playing, we would have a conversation and we would finesse ways to make it look as realistic as possible, even at such a young age and on such an obviously low budget. And I have so many like fond memories of those times. Gosh, we made like a fighting movie where we were like cage fighters in the garage. We made a military movie where Soren and I, we were army men in Vietnam.
That was a great one.
That was probably the best one.
That was the best one.
Yeah.
That was actually a video that when you showed people, they thought that we had like a full production team that helped us because we were using real guns. We were using
real uniforms.
For the
most part, yeah.
Full on camo. We had like tac vests. We were snipers that were stranded in Vietnam. And we had to fight our way out.
Yes, we did.
It was very aggressive.
People would watch it like, who played all these bad guys? Who played these Vietnamese characters? And I was like, that was my friend Nick. He played every single one of them.
Yeah.
That just tells you how many different costumes we had and different wigs and wardrobes, etc. And Nick was playing all of the characters, and somehow we did it in such a convincing way to where people actually thought we had hired a little mini army of enemies.
Right.
Oh man, good times, man. I think I would say about ages 9 to, I think the last movie we made was The Fighter. So that was probably when I was like 15. So I would say probably a good 6 years of making movies.
It transformed from making movies where we were putting a lot of effort into like one production into making little, I mean, I guess as we got older, we never really stepped away from it fully.
Sure.
We always had an interest in making videos or doing some type of like video coverage. But I think as we got older, and when you're a kid, you can almost kind of pull it off because it's kind of cute, right? But then once you're, 15, 16 years old, I don't think we spent time doing it as much because you couldn't rally your friends together because they were all focused on other things. Even though you may have wanted to be doing that, I think that might have been one of the hangups. But looking back on what kept us going, I would say that one, the accessibility to a variety of sets, especially being here in Oakdale, you're able to find really unique sets that people would have to pay to rent. So we had, access to everything. We had like old stuff, new stuff, countryside. We have
like a little forest back there.
We have a forest, we have the mountains right here. I know we scripted, or at least I think you may have even started working on a project up at the cabin.
We did. Yeah. Me and Will, we filmed it. It was about Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
At the cabin. We actually made that movie.
We had so much opportunity to find between my family and friends, opportunity to create, unique environments to produce content. And even to this day, I mean, that's something we still do when we have an opportunity to create new content. We do it.
Because environment plays such a big part in what you're creating.
Right.
It plays such a big part in the mood. And to your point, it's like, we spent a lot of time doing that. And it's kind of funny looking back on it. Most kids are at that age back then. That's when video games were just starting to get like really popular and Facebook was coming out. So most of our friends and stuff, they were all indoors doing all that. And you and I were out there creating at a young age and cultivating that creative spark that came to us at such a young age. Did we see it as a career path back then? Like when we were making all that, like I know that's when I personally started to think like, man, being a film director one day would be amazing. I kind of want to do that with my life, or being a screenwriter. Did that, like how was that for you?
Yeah, I think when we first started, there wasn't as much of an opportunity for young creatives as there is now. There's just like, obviously things have changed. We didn't even have camera phones back then, really.
Yeah, flip phones.
But I do remember vividly being down in the family, like the little family farm area, which is, for those of you listening, the family farm at our house is this one like old fruit grove with trees that are probably 40 years old. They don't really produce anymore. We call it the family farm because it used to be like this producing family farm, but that's where we would shoot a lot of content. That's where we shot Soldier Boys. And I remember very clearly being down there and like being behind the camera and thinking, I think we called ourselves
ESN Bros.
ESN Bros. It was like
Erickson, Soren, Nick.
ESN Bros Productions. That was like when we would make a little film, that was the thing. And I remember very clearly being like, one day I will own a production company. And it was probably like 10 years old. One day I will own a production company and it will be called ESN Bros. And we will be making movies just like we're doing right now. Fast forward, literally for me, almost 20 years later, and we have a production company and it's not called ESN Bros, but it's exactly what I said I wanted when I was 10 years old, being behind some Panasonic film camera. I don't think I ever really deviated from that, because I remember even in high school, I tried to like jumpstart that with one of my buddies.
Who?
I tried to jumpstart that with Karsten, our friend, who ended up coming to work for Platinum Peak later on. But we were in high school, and we were in Davis, California. So we're in a college town, and we knew that there were all these college parties happening. And so we're like, why don't we go film the college parties? Because at the time, I'm Schmacked was like this big social media account that had all these college parties being filmed. So Carson and we created this thing called College Uncut, which was us with my GoPro filming like our endeavors throughout high school. And we never really quite made it into the college parties with the camera, but
You got canceled beforehand.
we got canceled before. No, we just never made it. But the motivation was always there to continue to try and create that production company around something. And of course, when you're young and you think that partying is like super cool, you're gonna go and try and make party videos, or those, the videos you see on social media that are all hype and whatnot around partying. But that never really, turned into much. As with most of the things that we tried to create as creators, not a lot of things actually panned out.
Yeah.
But the one thing that has panned out is our agency, and that's cool because we've kind of like, I don't want to say manifested it, but we've been focused on that literally since we were kids. It's been the same mission since we were kids in terms of we want to create movies, we want to create content.
And it's kind of funny too, looking back on it, when we were kids making movies, our roles were somewhat similar. I remember I loved being in front of the camera and acting, kind of coming up with the stories, the scenes and stuff. And then Soren, for the most part, we would make you act in them as well. You didn't really, I feel like, didn't really like that part.
I didn't really like acting.
Yeah.
No, it's never really my favorite.
You thrived behind the camera. You were like our operator most of the time. You were always really good with figuring out like how to rewind, because we were on like old camcorders and it was a pain in the ass. And
we were on old camcorders, like where you'd have to rewind over footage to create new footage.
You couldn't just like go in and cut a scene until maybe later we got a more recent one. But for the most part, you had to rewind and tape over it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I remember too, it was super funny. Like, how at the end of every movie you see, there's like the cast, right?
Yeah.
There's the credits. And we would like write on a piece of paper the cast.
And
like,
then hold it in front of us.
And then hold it in front of us, and we'd film it. And that was just like, hell yeah, we got a cast. We got credits in there. Oh man, good times.
Yeah, looking back on it, it's wild. Because it definitely, it made you pretty versatile as a youngster, as a young creative, because like looking back on it, everything that we were doing back then, it's pretty much exactly the same as what we're doing now, just on another level. And what I mean by that is you're shooting content and then you're taking it into post-production. We were doing the exact same thing back then as we do now. Now there are just more layers to the post-production process, right? Where back then we were doing in-camera sound effects. We were doing in-camera effects. Now you get to post and you have this world of opportunity in front of you, which I would say that it's so much easier to be a creative. And I would say if we were creating the movies that we were creating when we were 10 years old now, they would be amazing.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Recently, I've watched some of our movies we made as kids, and even now, looking back on it, they were pretty impressive. And I've seen some movies that famous Hollywood directors made as kids when they were our age, and being very objective, ours were better. They were. It's kind of just funny to look back on it. It's just like, it's crazy.
Looking back on it, I wish we would have been able to spend more time continuing that cultivation from ages, like I think I was 8 when I first started. I probably stopped when I was about 12 or 13, the Fighters. Yeah. And then there was this break and we stopped doing anything concert related. When I say that, I don't mean like completely, like I still had GoPros and I would film things here and there and make little edits, but they were more montage lifestyle edits of what I was doing in life. And that what I was doing was really just adventuring, being out in the outdoors, backpacking, skiing, climbing, biking, and then being a competitive athlete and spending most of my time and focus being a competitive athlete, I kind of lost that opportunity creating the creative content that we as creatives want to create. But I also don't think that was necessarily a bad thing, because it really developed me during that period to understand who I am and what my capacity is now going forward. And I think that if I never would have kind of pivoted into being a dedicated collegiate athlete, I don't think I would have really been able to sustain as the creative lifestyle is today.
Because being a competitive athlete, it's all about maximizing your skills and cultivating your craft, really channeling that competitive drive within you. And you and me both, from a young age, we were athletes, competitive athletes, doing the whole travel ball for me, travel baseball for you, even to an extent, swimming as well, travel swimming. Gosh, you were doing soccer. At one point you were doing soccer, swimming. Weren't you like doing like
basketball,
baseball as well?
Yeah. At one point I was competitive swimming, which was year round, sometimes 2 practices a day, playing soccer, playing baseball, and playing 6th grade basketball.
Wild.
And I think water polo.
Wild.
Yeah, and water polo. So swimming, baseball, soccer, 6th grade basketball, and water polo. Not all of them were to the same level, of course, but we were pretty integrated as athletes, and I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
Like the competition and being an athlete and learning how to be a better athlete, it really is what, personally, it's what sets me apart now as a creator, because as an athlete, especially as a swimmer, you create stamina, you create resilience, and now like you can throw as many curveballs as you want at me now as a creator. I'll knock them out of the park. You could throw a curveball at me when I was, playing baseball. I would swing and miss every time. I don't think I ever hit a ball.
That's not true.
I did hit one, maybe like one. I was good at getting walked or getting beamed. I just lean into it. But that's the thing. As a creator, if you have an upbringing as an athlete, you have an advantage. And I see that now. Like when I see other creators come up and you see that they were, high level athlete growing up, you see, oh, he's going to be good.
He's going to be a killer.
He's going to be a killer.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's really hard.
It is. And that's something, it made me, like, I remember when we hit that certain point in our lives where it was really full throttle in our sports, me baseball, you swimming. The goal at a certain point around age 14, 15 was to get scholarships. That was always the expectation that was placed upon us. That was our goal as well. And during those years, those early teenage years, that's when you really have to put the pedal to the metal in terms of putting in the work to get to that scholarship level. And so it's not like our creativity ever ended, We just simply didn't have as much time, and all our energy and focus really did go towards our sports. And I remember playing sports growing up, and it was kind of interesting because when you are a high level athlete, generally you don't really run into too many other high caliber athletes who also have this creative side as well. Not in every case, there's obviously exceptions, but from my personal experience, and I'm sure you can say for yours for the most part, I felt a little bit like I don't really fully belong as an athlete, but I don't really fully belong entirely in the creative camp either. I'm like kind of in the middle because I have this total like internal creative world inside my head. I love writing, I love acting, but then I also love playing sports as well. And that was my goal to get a scholarship and go play baseball in college. And so it was kind of balancing that dichotomy. But looking back on it, there are so many relative things between sports and being a creative. Like one, for example, for a lot of sports, it's a team sport, right? And you have to work together towards a common goal, to put all the pieces together to emerge victorious. And it's kind of the same thing on a film set. Everyone is working together, doing different roles to reach the same end game.
Right.
And that's something that you learn as an athlete growing up, especially on a team sport, is to work together, to work collaboratively. I'm really thankful for that. And I'm thankful that was built into me as a young age because it's carried over into what we do today.
Yeah, I think for you, more so than myself, I think the dynamic is a lot different because in baseball specifically, you have to actually work together to execute plays to deliver. Whereas in swimming, you don't really have to execute plays. Yeah, like in relays, and if you have a team that's good enough to compete for like a stage, sure, it makes sense. And I didn't have that for a long period of time until I was a little bit older. I think in baseball, you have more of the collaboration process.
Right.
And in swimming, you have more of the accountability process. So as a baseball player, in terms of the collaboration process, what are things that you would say are similar to a creative team and a baseball team?
I would say like understanding the other person's goal. Like, for example, understanding what the pitcher, what his objective is with the catcher, or with the batter he's facing, knowing the situation, knowing the count. And that's relative into like a filmmaking as well, because everyone has to be on the same page with the goal. It's like in filmmaking is also, there's a lot of strategy involved to get the right shot, to convey the right message. And in baseball, in order to get out of the inning, in order to win, in order to whatever the goal is, the whole team has to be in sync, right? Performing under pressure as well. Baseball is one of those things where when you're up to the plate and you're batting, all eyes are on you. And that is similar in regards to filmmaking in some regards too. Like if you're shooting, right? Like if we're doing a wedding or we're filming something that maybe we can only get a shot once, it's like all that pressure is on you. So that's not exactly the same as the collaborative nature, but it's one of those things that I remember feeling being on a baseball field. What are some other things? 'Cause that's a great question. Like,
I think there's a lot
being
of
precise
performance, being present and performing. There's some games or some baseball tournaments where you're just on, and then it's the same way with filmmaking. There are some times where you're just on, like you're getting like ideas very quickly.
Right.
Maybe it's the crowd or the environment in a baseball game. Like the crowd or the environment could have an impact on your performance as a player. It's the same way in filmmaking. Like if I'm with a bunch of people who are super stiff and they're not fluid in their conversations, they're not fluid and transparent on set or on any project, especially with clients, I feel more reserved and you're not just loosey-goosey. And I know that translates into swimming. When you're loose, you're on. And it's like that with any sport. When you're feeling it, you're loose, you're confident, you're in
the groove.
You're in the groove, you're on. And that's the same with filmmaking. And you're willing to maybe in baseball, you're willing to swing at a pitch that you feel like you can hit. It's the same way in filmmaking where you feel like you can take this shot that you don't know if it's going to really pan out, but when you nail it, it's like making contact with the bat, right?
Yeah.
You just nailed this shot. You're like, holy cow.
And it feels good. You just know.
Right off the bat, you know it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
Same way in filmmaking.
Yeah, and I think baseball as well, there's the coach, and baseball is very strategic. It's very planned. The pitches that are being called, who's being put in what position, calling pinch runners, calling batters, the lineup itself, it all works together to achieve a goal. And so when you're working with a team, knowing everybody's role and how they're going to execute, knowing everybody's specific strengths, specific weaknesses, that will all play into a well-oiled machine.
Looking back on our development as athletes when we were kids, I would say that the biggest contribution to our creative careers would be the resilience and also the competitive drive that's just built into you. Because when you're a creative, you don't have to be competitive with other creatives. And I think a lot of times that's the downfall of creatives, where they're so competitive with other creatives that they don't know how to collaborate.
The ego
gets to them. And it's funny because when I look at a lot of creatives that don't really make it to the next level, it's because they don't know how to collaborate. They don't know how to lead. They don't know how to take a step back and give someone else the reins and say, hey, you know what? Yeah. You should go to bat right now.
Not me.
Being
a team player.
Right. Being a team player. In swimming, the way I would kind of bring that into swimming, sometimes if you were at a swim meet and you needed to switch up the order of the relay, maybe someone else had more gas in the tank, so they're going to, lead off. And then someone needed a little more rest and they're going to anchor. And that would give us a head start so the anchor didn't have to pull as much weight, or vice versa. Maybe the anchor was going to go all in. There's, so many ways that you could kind of like relate it back to any sport that you played growing up. But being competitive absolutely helps you as a creator, but it's learning how to take that competitive mindset and channel it in a way where you're competing with yourself and the deadlines and goals that you're setting for yourself and for everyone involved in the creative process. It's not like I'm going to get on set or get on a project and outdo everyone so everyone feels inadequate, because I've been with other creators where we'll go to work on projects and their only goal was to make everyone else feel like they had no idea what they were doing. They're using lingo that no one knows what they're talking about. They didn't even know what they were talking about. I know they didn't. They're saying all this stuff about projects and ideas and things that they had for the future that never came to fruition because they didn't have a team to get them there. It was all just, let me get on set with you and reframe you and make you feel like you're inadequate so that I can like go post this on social media and get clout. If that's your outlook as a creator, you'll fail. If you're competitive with yourself, ensuring, hey, I'm going to be better than myself last time. I'm going to show up better than I was last time in terms of I'm more present. I'm going to provide more for my team. Even if you're the guy in charge, you're the main dude, you're almost like putting in overtime for people who are under you in the production. You're helping move lights around and you're the director. You know, you're helping move the camera and you're just a producer. Like, you're funding the project. I've been there, literally done it. Who cares? Like, go do it. Pick it up. Move the sandbags. Do the things that the PA is supposed to do.
Yeah, get in the trenches in there.
Get in the trenches.
Bring loyalty and respect.
And be competitive with yourself in that regard. And I find myself in this situation all the time as a creator. Will I go and do the things that I'm not really like rolled to do? And then when I can do them, I'm almost like, yeah, I can still do that. So which will incentivize you or motivate you, because you know, as a creator, if you understand the creative process from the ground up and you can do every single layer, you're going to always be more confident and you're going to start competing with yourself more and more. And that's where it's all about.
Well said. That's a very good recap there on that. I mean, looking back on it, I'm very thankful for my life as an athlete, regardless of the fact there were some points, because we played so much, you know, baseball for me, swimming for you, for, you know, just so much time and hours and energy spent as an athlete. There are definitely some times looking back on it where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm burnt out, whatever. But the fact that we did put in so much energy, I think there's definitely more pros than cons, and a lot of valuable skills, a lot of valuable traits were instilled in us because of our sports that have been carried over to what we do today. And I'm very, very grateful for that. So, you know, shout out mom and dad for getting us in sports at a young age and keeping us dedicated like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a wrap on this. I think next podcast, we're going to talk more about how we eventually got back into filmmaking and what eventually came of our sports careers, and if we ever made it or not to our goal as getting a scholarship, and then talk more about eventually how our sports careers turned into Platinum Peak Productions and getting a company going, and what that took in the beginning, and all the fond and less than fond memories that came with starting a company. That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a juicy one. You guys aren't going to want to miss that one. Holy cow.
Yeah, well, that'll wrap it up for today. I think we wanted to keep this one quick. This episode is really for athletes who are in that process of growing as a creator, because for Erickson and myself, being athletes is really one of those things that contributed to our success as being a creator. Looking back on it, it's really important to understand how being an athlete as a young kid and as a teenager and even as a young adult impacts your life going forward. I think there are a lot of things that come with that, being expectations and being that development of a creator in terms of like this competitive expectation that we have for ourselves. Because those expectations that we had as athletes really were they were created in our own mind, right? So we were creating these expectations, which we then had to create the foundational work day to day to make that happen. So I think as a creator who may have been an athlete as a young kid, really take that time to look back at how being an athlete made you who you are today as a creator. If you haven't joined our Discord community, please go check us out on Discord, Scaling Creator. Add us, get verified. It's a great experience. We have a lot of creators in there. We hang out, we make content together, we play video games, we travel. Like I said, we're actually heading to the Philippines next week, and we're going to be creating content, so you guys can check that out when we get back. Check us out at scalingcreator.com. Check out Erickson on Instagram, Erickson W. Dickens. Check myself out, Soren Dickens, on Instagram as well. And we look forward to having you listen in on the next episode of Scaling Creator.